Welcome to a special episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations with Brent Balinski, featuring one of the companies we're putting forward as part of our quest to identify and celebrate Australia's 50 most innovative manufacturers for 2024. This campaign has been made possible through the generous support of MYOB, the original business management software developers, nothing beats the OG, as well as the CSIRO, the New South Wales Government's Advanced Manufacturing Research Facility, and the Commonwealth Bank. Mark Henry, thank you very much for joining us on AU Manufacturing Conversations. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Many thanks, Brent. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure all mine. So I'll ask you the same question we ask all our guests, and that is, how did you get here and what do you make?
Wow. Yeah, it's a lifetime to get to this point. Well, I'm 57, and I guess it started from when I was a kid, but the end result is we're the only real production manufacturer of cookware and knives in Australia. Yeah, there's little artisan producers, but we're in production in volume and in the retail stores, Myer and all the specialty cookware stores and things like that. And we export worldwide. So we've been doing this for 10 years, but all the steps in between, I don't know, is too much to mention. Like anyone who's done something, started as a kid, just always curious about how things worked. So I pulled everything apart and put it back together if I could. And then one of my grandfathers was a great backyard inventor. He made all sorts of things to make his life easier. And really, in the old school way, he made things because it was cheaper than buying them. He made do. Then I did an apprenticeship. At age 15, I started Queensland Rail and North Ipswich Railway Workshops as an apprentice turner. Completed the apprenticeship, worked as a tradesman for a few years, fitter and turner around Australia. Then while I was fitter and turner, I did night school to finish my senior, and that got me into QUT, the engineering and business double degree. And that really was a big turning point. I had all the practical skills. I understood manufacturing and materials and how materials react in practice and things like that. But that mechanical engineering degree really put it all into context. But the other degree, the combined degree, was business with a marketing major. And that was pivotal because it really clicked. I understood how things that I make could be turned into a brand. People like the look of them. And if you get a brand and some IP protection for what you've invented, then you might have a sustainable business. And that crucial step really was real innovation that you can protect with patents, particularly patents, utility patents. So I really focused on that and launched my first company while I was at university, 96, Furitechnics, the Furi knives. It took off, much to my surprise. So I had to complete this double degree somehow. So I had to stretch it out, and I got a special 1-year extension because I was killing myself trying to run the business and finish the double degree, but I finished it. Yeah, wow. Then the company kept growing, took it to the USA, lived there for 7 years, sold Furitechnics in 2008. It changed hands a few times. I moved to France and lived there 8 years. First of all, a 2-year contract to set up a manufacturing department for knives for Debouillet, the old French company. That went well. In fact, I was just in Germany at our biggest trade show for the industry, Ambiente, and Debouillet were there, as they are every year, and on display were the knives I designed for them way back. So it's great to see your babies out in the natural environment. I still walk into restaurants and see my products on racks, and I go to someone's house or a party or whatever, and they got my products there. And sometimes those products have been in the family for a quarter of the century. So it's pretty special, and it's part of what I wanted to achieve in the beginning was that kind of longevity of products after being really frustrated with disposability, and I could see where it was going. And also I could see where manufacturing was going. It was going offshore. I could see that way back then as a student. And in fact, that double degree course was designed by QUT along the lines of MIT or RMIT in Melbourne to develop a new generation of local engineers who could revive local manufacturing. That's the whole reason for that double degree. And out of my class, I think I'm the only one actually manufacturing in Australia, because most of the others, a lot went into the marketing side. The ones who stuck with engineering ended up doing the classic thing of designing the product and having it made in China. So anyway, long story short, then while I was in France, I finally cracked the code how to make one-piece wrought iron and wrought stainless steel cookware with machinery instead of pounding them out with hammers the way it's been done for 3,500 years. You know, the only other one-piece pans, they're either been hand wrought from billet, or they've been cast, sand cast, or aluminium that's been die cast. Of all those different possibilities, no one had mechanized wrought iron cookware. So that was a world first. But the other thing was, we still have the only one-piece wrought stainless steel cookware in the world. The real advantages of one piece, particularly in these materials, our materials that are malleable and don't crack. The big advantage is you've got no rivets, no screws, no plastic, no separate parts. They're one piece of a material that can't crack. So the only way to destroy them is to physically wear through the base, I guess. And I don't know how long that'd take. I think on a glass top, a ceramic top, particularly with protection from seasoning over the iron pans, there's no abrasion going on. So I don't know. It's going to be hundreds and hundreds of years, potentially millennia, because wrought iron pans from the Roman era and prior are still in museums across Europe.
Yeah, you're making one-piece knives and now one-piece cookware. Is there a simplicity, a beauty, something to do with your personal aesthetic that marries up with that idea of just having a single piece, no cladding, no coating, nothing like that, just the pure item?
Yeah, I think it's just that I'm simple. You know, it's the way I design. I look at a lot of products and I just see unnecessary complexity. A good example is knives. When I designed those Fury knives to be one piece of high carbon stainless steel alloy, at the time, all my chef friends said, no, these are the best brands, the Germans, the French, etc. back then. And I had a look at them, and I owned some of them. And I thought, they're engineering dinosaurs. They got rivets, they got wood, they got plastic, they got gaps, they fall apart, the geometry and the materials. And so that's when I started to get serious about looking at it at university. And all the projects that I had an option to choose my own project, invariably I chose knives. And my honours thesis for the engineering degree was knife materials and cutting edges. And that was a year-long study with a lot of help from the lab at QUT and scanning electron microscope and all that stuff. So I did a lot of in-depth study that I don't think regular commercial manufacturers have the luxury of doing. And that taught me a lot. So I've applied that ever since. And so one piece, form and function. You know, really I start with a concept or something I want to solve with a new type of product. And I always keep subtracting components and combining components. For instance, when we make tongs, I use a live hinge. There's no pins, there's no springs, there's no hinges. So when I design a removable handle for cookware, we've launched that to our followers. It's not public yet, it's not in stock. But a cookware range with a removable handle it's popular in Europe. There's lots of them around, and the biggest brand of all, I always thought was a huge mistake in design. It's full of springs and clips and plastic and things that can fail. And there's a lot of failures. There's a lot of pans hitting the ground and spraying contents everywhere, hot content, you know, so it's a big problem. And so I set myself a challenge to design a removable handle with the locking mechanism or a locking facility to get that done with one piece of metal. And I patented that as well. And it works really well. It achieves all that, and it's stronger than anything else on the market because it's one piece of investment cast stainless steel. or bronze now. So, just reducing things until they're as simple as possible, because I know that means durability.
Yep.
And curves, I like curves rather than straight geometry, so they end up in a lot of my designs as well.
Right. And so with Solidteknics, you're working with two main types of material, with your Oz iron and your Noni range, and there are some other ancillary bits of titanium or whatever, but let's focus on those two. Why are they your two sort of staple materials? What do they do for cookware that some other choices might not?
Yeah, well, starting with the iron, like I was saying, the traditional way to make a one-piece pan has been cast iron, and that only really got popular a couple of 100 years ago when the mechanization of the process became economical enough. And so cast iron pans really were the cheap alternative to wrought iron pans back then, because there was only either wrought copper alloys or wrought iron. Hundreds of years ago, there was no other option. So cast iron is still out there. It's got the real problem of being a brittle material. It cracks.
And heavy.
So heavy, twice the weight of wrought iron because of the thick sections in it, and a very poor conductor of heat, cast iron. So anyway, wrought iron really just solves all those things. It's more conductive, it's lighter, not in density, but because you can make thinner sections, it doesn't crack, it's malleable. So I couldn't see any disadvantages, and particularly when we could manufacture it smoothly, not with a hammer, not beating a red hot billet with a hammer. They're beautiful, and there's still some artisans making them. They're just works of art, but they're not practical for the bulk of chefs or home cooks,
Sure. And your nickel-free stainless steel, what was behind that choice? Tell me a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, that was interesting. Well, first of all, the wrought iron is Australian material, so that was a big advantage. I knew what I wanted for a stainless steel alloy, but no stainless steels are made in Australia these days. So I had to search wider and ended up finding Finland, a small specialty mill in Finland who could make this stainless steel to my specification. And without giving away trade secrets, it's nickel-free. It's a non-nickel. There's can be small trace elements, very tiny traces of nickel in there because we use the same crucibles as their main production, but it's very tiny amount. The key is that the composition makes it way more conductive than any nickel-based stainless steels. And that's why we can make a solid one-piece stainless steel pan that's more conductive than all the other manufacturers all this time, using their nickel stainless steels with layers of aluminium or copper or whatever to try to get the heat to conduct through that final layer of a stainless steel that's essentially, it's such a poor conductor, it resists that heat transfer. So you've got to pump a lot of heat in to get it through that final layer. But they like nickel stainless steels, the other manufacturers, because they're easy to form and they're easy to polish and they look great. Our Furitechnics stainless steels are harder to work and they don't polish up quite as bright, but they're still stain resistant. And the key is that they are far superior conductors. So in one solid monoblock of 3mm or 2mm stainless steel, we can outconduct the biggest brands with all their years of making clad stainless steels.
We'd like to take another moment now to acknowledge our sponsors, MYOB, as well as the CSIRO, New South Wales Government's Advanced Manufacturing Research Facility, and the Commonwealth Bank. There would be no 50 Most Innovative without these guys. Thanks again for making this campaign possible. Right, and so we'll return to products and to materials probably in a little while, but first of all, I'd like to know something about your team, please. You're based in the Sunshine Coast and you have manufacturing in Sydney. Whereabouts in Sydney are you? And tell me about some of the stuff that goes on in the factory, please.
Well, there's actually 3 and about to be 4 contract manufacturers around Sydney, all in the west. And the key one that makes most of our cookware they've been fantastic. They're a family business who understood what I was talking about when I went to them with this crazy concept. I knew they had the machinery I needed, but I've only owned one small factory and I'd never want to do that again. I'd rather focus on developing the innovation and then hand it over to the real experts. So the two brothers who run this business, they understood what I was talking about and they were willing to take a risk on my idea to make one-piece cookware, because my whole career I've had that challenge of going to contract manufacturers, and everything I design is different to anything they've made before. There's major challenges, and if I'm not challenging a contract manufacturer, if they think that's easy, then I don't want to make the product. If it's that easy or it's been done before, there's no point doing it. If you're manufacturing in Australia, it has to be true innovation. So anyway, they got it. They were on board, and that means they were willing to invest a lot of their own time and money in changing what they do to make the products that I wanted. So the benefits, and I told them back in our very first meeting, the benefit is they've got a cash cow that goes on for decades. And I knew that because that's how I design products. I'm not a fast thinker, so I prefer to do something right the first time and make it a classic so I can keep making the same thing for years and decades. And if enough people agree and they sell, then it's got the potential to go on for more than one generation. And that's what's happening with Furitechnics, with the chefs recommending them still to their apprentices. So it's a second generation coming through. So yeah, they got it. And same with second and third factory. Third factory might be dropping away, but we've got a fourth one that got some new capabilities that we're after around Sydney. Then we do a little bit of manufacturing still in the USA. Investment casting, they're particularly good, a factory that we've got there. We've tried Australia and failed at investment casting, unfortunately. We just couldn't get competitive at that in Australia. So USA it was, but we want to manufacture as much as we can in Australia. And if you can come up with something truly innovative and protect it with patents, then you can have the protection you need to earn high enough gross margins to survive against cheap offshore imports. And that's what I've done my whole career. So I'd love to show other Australian manufacturers how to do that. That's part of my mission.
Our mission is helping people tell the story. If they've got such advice, I'd love to hear more of it. I'm sure I will as this conversation progresses a little longer. I was going to ask about the shortage of traditional skills in Australia, because it's very hard to find everything from tool makers to people who work with forging and casting and everything else that kind of non-advanced manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing is the buzzword of the last few years, and while high-tech gear is wonderful and high-tech ways of producing it is wonderful, it's still underpinned by a lot of basic skills. I was going to ask your perspective on the shortage of skills in Australia, if you feel like commenting, but being that you're using a contract manufacturer, perhaps it's not your place, but I'll leave the answer to you.
I've seen it, and I've seen the progression over the last 25 years or so in this industry. And what I've seen is cookware was made in Australia. There's those brands, Rayco, Steel, Bessemer, they're all gone. If they're still a brand, it's because they've moved the production to China or now Vietnam and places like that. The skills that made that viable for 100 years up until then, a couple of decades ago, are largely being lost. And that's just in that little industry. I see it, and you know about it, all across the industries. I think what it takes to retain those skills for the future is enough designers who have enough innovation to manufacture it in Australia. We're doing it with keeping tool makers employed, skilled turners and machine operators and artisan craftspeople. But the tool makers for us is crucial, and they're getting hard to find in Australia. Still enough of them out there so we can do what we got to do. I think the responsibility comes back to the designers to choose Australia and to have such a good design that they can protect it, and then that makes it viable. And of course, the prices of the end product is going to be more expensive than an import. But in the long run, what's more important? I think we should be capable of at least making the essentials for daily life, like cookware and knives. You can't get much more essential than that to feed yourself. You need shelter, so we should be good at that. And Aussies are pretty good at that. So the essentials we should be manufacturing. We saw in the pandemic that if supply chains shut down, then we can get into a bit of trouble. And I don't think it's over yet. There's going to be more challenges coming. And then don't even get me started on AI and what the robots are going to do to industry. So in the end, they'll basically wipe out human-made products except for one niche, and that niche is artisan craftspeople, artisan manufacturers who build a reputation for human-made products. When 99% of the products will be robot made or additive manufacturing, all the things that are coming, things we can't even imagine yet, driven by AI, definitely 1/100th the price of what a human can make. When AI really gets going with their connectivity to new methods of manufacturing that we can't even conceive yet, they'll be making products at such a fraction of the cost that everyone's going to need to buy them, almost everyone, because 90% of the population will be unemployed. So those that are unemployed will be on a living wage, something like Social Security now, and they're going to need to buy the robot-made stuff because there's no money, The ones that are making money will be either in support of the capitalists who own the machines and the AI, or the artisans. And the artisans get their money from humans who've made their money some other way, who only want human-made things, not AI-made things. That'll be a real movement in the coming decades. So I think that makes it even more crucial to hang on to those artisan skills, and for people at least part-time to build their creative crafts to the point that they can make the transition instead of taking the living wage and staying at home and being plugged into augmented reality or complete online existence to escape the boredom. There's going to be people who still value creativity, human creativity, and they'll be willing to pay for it. So that's kind of the future. I think that's where we're headed. That's my best guess from what I've seen. It's fairly predictable, I think.
Yeah, I share some of those thoughts. My opinions aren't interesting, and nobody's, if they're tuning in at all, tuning in to listen to my take. I think that on the whole, the inequality will go no other way as things are more automated, other than to aggregate at the top and to have people fight for the scraps at the bottom. And I think that there'll be people in every era. There'll be people who want the best, who want the most non-commoditized stuff that's made by the geniuses, the craftsmen and such, and that will be in demand. Let's get back to innovation. You've mentioned that a couple of times, and this is for our Australia's 50 Most Innovative campaign. I'd like to get your personal definition, please. I'm guessing it has something to do with novelty, but it's your answer, not mine. Let's hear it.
Well, of course, novelty, that's just the starting point. Innovation needs to have novelty to be protected, particularly utility patents are great. You really need them if you want to manufacture in a place like Australia. Like I was saying earlier, the only way you're going to survive is to be able to protect your price points. You've got a high cost of manufacture. You also need high gross margins because probably your volume is going to be a lot less than the big multinationals manufacturing offshore. So you do need high gross margins to survive, there's no doubt about it. So combined with high manufacturing costs and high gross margins, your prices are going to be high in the market. Now, we're pretty efficient at it. So our prices are towards the top end, but by no means the most expensive cookware on the market. There's Chinese-made cookware that's more expensive than ours because it's got a celebrity chef on the box, that kind of thing. And they're disposable and toxic. They're synthetic coated. So, yeah, I think you've got to be able to have IP protection. So that by definition, it needs to be a world first. That's my simple definition, I think.
Another thing I'd like to pick your brains about is your long-time use of Kickstarter. It's not the newest thing to use Kickstarter. It's been around a while and lots of manufacturers use it, but it's sort of more the exception than the rule to launch a product there. Tell me about why you've done it. I think I read 51 times or a number similar to that. Mm-hmm. Why you've gone that route so many times for new products with Solidteknics.
It really started from the very first product I launched under Solidteknics because, I'd been down the path of very traditional business. I had lots of investors to get the equity to do what I wanted to do. I manufactured products, stuck them in a warehouse, and then reps went out and got orders, and then we shipped them. Then we waited patiently for the customers to pay. So the big gap between manufacturing all that product and receiving payment is the capital that you need just for inventory. And that was pretty brutal in the USA when we were on a very high growth trajectory with celebrity endorsement over there. We were growing so fast that our forecasts were way bigger than our current business. So we had to manufacture now this much larger quantity for the future and keep doing that. And so it's the classic, the inverse, cash flow is the inverse of growth under that model. And I knew that. So I spent most of my time talking to bankers and accountants and lawyers back in that day. And I don't want to do that again. I'm an engineer and a designer, and that's all I really want to do. Now, because I own the company and I'm also the managing director, there's a lot of other things I need to do, but I don't really like them. Anyway, long story short, that model, the very first product, I committed. See, I sat in France for a while after finishing my contract with Devoyer. I had a 2-year gap to forming Solidteknics, but ever since selling Furitechnics, I've been trying to think of a better model than going down that path again, the traditional path. So I saw crowdfunding of products come up, and I thought, well, that's probably a pretty good solution, because instead of spending all my own money on tooling and inventory up front and then waiting, I can get the people to tell me if they like the product first, set a target funding level that if it's achieved, I know I can manufacture those products and deliver them. And then the beautiful thing, really, what sealed it for me as a concept is I knew that if I covered the cost of all the tooling and the production, of course, in that first fundraising, then when I developed my wholesale price lists for the retailers, it wouldn't include the amortization of all those high tooling investment. It would be done. So it's just the unit cost from the contract manufacturer. So that's why at retail now, we're pretty successful in stores like Myer and all the kitchenware stores, particularly the upscale ones or the gourmet kitchenware stores. In those stores, our prices are probably half what they should be if we had to amortize out the cost of the tooling. So it's a big difference. So anyway, we collect all that money up front. We make the tooling, we make the products, and we do an overrun and put some of the product into inventory in the warehouse if we want it to be part of our permanent range. But we got the option. Not everything we launch, we put into the warehouse because, we've launched, 100 products or something, but we might only have 30 in the warehouse. So that means we've, invested 1/3 of the capital we need to invest in inventory, and it turns fast. So it's 51 Kickstarters in Australia, and I just got the stats from the team. That's raised a bit under 12 million from those campaigns. And in the USA, we've had 19 campaigns raising a bit over 2 million. That's Kickstarters in the USA. But then we do another thing before we even go to Kickstarter. We have exclusive launches to our Lovers group, and that's a Facebook closed group for members only. We've had 39 launches through the Lovers group, and they have totaled a bit under 3.5 million. So anyway, they get the best price. They get numbered in series, sometimes a little signature from me, and the date on the product, because they're meant to be heirlooms and collectibles,
And it's fascinating that you think in, as we saw with your AI answer earlier, you think in much longer terms than people normally do, and you're thinking in a very long term with the longevity of these products, the multi-century guarantee, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever sort of stopped and thought, oh, well, this isn't normal. Why do I do this? And come up with an answer. And if so, what was that answer?
I don't know. I gave up trying to self-analyze years ago, Brent. I am what I am. I is what I is, Popeye used to say, because I'm wired a bit differently, and I don't know what that is. It might be my special type of autism, I don't know. But I've got this crystal ball built into my head, and I can see trends. I can see long-term trends. I can absorb a lot of information from different sources and see a common thread emerging. So I've used that in all aspects of my life. And, I'm sitting here on my 92-acre farm in the Sunshine Coast hinterland behind Noosa, I breed cattle and chooks, and I've got a permaculture food forest. I've got no connection to the outside world. We've got solar, we've got water, both rainwater and spring-fed billabongs and dams all over, and our own sewage treatment. So we're off the grid. And that's because I see the writing on the wall as well in the long term. So when it comes to products, it happened with the Furi knives. I just wanted them to be around for generations, and who knows why. One thing is I have always despised waste and disposability. I was like that as a kid. I must have been born like that somehow. So I do that with my products. And now it's really a bit of fun, because every time we state our warranty as multi-century, there's always a giggle, like people think it's a marketing stunt. And we say, yeah, it sounds funny, but think about it. This is one piece of a material that can't be cracked. It doesn't crack. It's malleable. So how long do you think it's going to last? It's got to be centuries. It's really obvious to a mechanical engineer it's going to be at least multiple centuries. So, and in the case of the Furitechnics stainless steel, who knows, both of them, millennia. So anyway, it's a real claim, but that's just the product. The other legacy I want to leave through these products, not just because they're durable for multiple centuries, but because they're healthier than the other products that are made in this industry. There's going to be a serious backlash to synthetic coated cookware. It's already been, it started, but they're still in 90% of households plus, just because of sheer convenience and because people have forgotten how to really cook. When people first get our cookware, they honestly don't know that you need good temperature control and some fats and oils to make your pan non-stick, because for 2 generations we've been babied with this petrochemical coating that ensures no matter what temperature you got, no matter what you do, the stuff's not going to stick. But in the old days, before that coating and before the internet, people had to figure it out. Otherwise, the dinner stuck to the pan. So they all knew about temperature and timing and fats and oils automatically. A lot of that knowledge has been lost, but we're helping bring it back. And what is important for me in the long run is helping people understand that we're bringing back something quite ancient, but doing it in a better way. And then the stainless steel is a whole other thing, because it cooks like iron and it cleans like stainless steel. That's something that people are working out about our Furitechnics stainless steels. But in any case, sustainability is a word used too much, and there's a lot of industries you don't want to sustain. They shouldn't exist. We're going to have to do better. When you look at the pillage of the planet and the damage we're doing in the name of greed and expansion and, more SUVs and flat screens and all the waste that people think they're entitled to these days, it just can't go on. There's going to be a reckoning, So in my little tiny sphere of influence, I figure if I can do one industry well and replace the toxic products with products that are clean and healthy and really do almost zero harm to the planet, and in the long run, basically no harm. Say my pans last 500 years, the cost to the planet per year is pretty close to zero. So it's like you've created a product from nothing, as opposed to a product that is thrown in the bin in a year or 2 or 5 years' time and you start again. Just to put it in context, our landfill in Australia receives at least 1.2 million non-stick pans every year. They're disposable. They're meant to be thrown in the bin. That's what the manufacturers and retailers want you to do. The amount of times where we're in front of retailers, they say, oh, yeah, but we sell so many of those non-stick pans. And if someone buys yours, that's the last pan they ever buy. We say, that's great. Then our job's done. If you stop selling non-stick pans, that's exactly what we want. So it's about regenerating an industry that shouldn't exist. It's been going on for too long, and it's about to change. So anyway, if we can do that in our little corner of influence, then we want to inspire other manufacturers to do the same. It's almost every manufacturing industry is doing some amount of damage. It's just you've got to weigh up the cost benefit of that, not just to the people, but to the planet in the long run. And if the equation ends up, no, it's just doing a lot of damage no matter what we do, and it's just for making money, then don't do it. Think of something else. Do something else. It's not good enough to just make money. People with some skills in an area and some education or whatever, they can make money. There's all kinds of ways to make money, but there's really bad ways to make money. And there's some very few good ways to make money. So get creative and think of the good ways,
Yeah. And so it's not quite as long-term focused, but it's to do with the passage of time. Your decade anniversary for this company comes up this year. What are you doing to celebrate?
Oh, we talk about it a lot, and we feel a fair bit of pride around the office. And most of my staff have been with us for most of the journey. So what we're doing for our customers, though, is coming out with a new 10th anniversary edition. And so the base will be stamped 10th anniversary edition. When we launch them to the Lovers Group and Kickstarter, they'll be, I think, particularly for the Lovers Group, they'll be numbered in series. So we always keep number 1 to number 20. They're in our museum warehouse. We keep those for the future. But people get the chance to get a very low numbered new version of our innovation that's dated and numbered in series. So we'll be launching those pretty soon with some special deals for our loyal customers. And that's about it. I mean, this year is big for all kinds of reasons, not directly related to the 10 years, but just because we're hitting our stride and we're going to have a serious crack again at the USA this year. We've got a whole new range of knives coming that are world first. We've got patents pending on a system of modular knives, you could say, without giving too much away. That's very easy for the public to understand. I've made a lot of knives that are quite complex and expert level and not great for the general public. So these are for home cooks and chefs alike. And a new knife sharpener that's pro level but very simple to use. So they, along with our mostly made in Australia, the blades from Japan, for those, because we want to go to the masters of that style of blade without having to do them ourselves like we did with our Solidity knives, chisel edged and hand sharpened in Australia, and nearly killed us, So we'll leave that to the experts, and we'll take our Australian made cookware back to the USA and give it a big push with celebrity endorsement and influencers and things like that. That's all happening this year. So a big USA push.
Right. And so our standard closing question, as you've been very generous with your time, but I've spent just about enough of it. Let's get to the end. The standard closing question is, what's one issue within manufacturing that isn't getting the attention it deserves at the moment? What's your point of view?
I think I've touched on a lot, because this is what I'm mostly interested in, is in Australian manufacturing, we should be manufacturing more in Australia. And I know how, and I want to show other manufacturers how to do it. And really, the principles are applicable to almost every manufacturing industry. So that book I wrote, it wasn't for publication, except for one chapter that directly relates to the future of manufacturing, not just the products, but the people and the planet. So I'll be revising that and releasing it sometime soon, and then mentoring and potentially investing in other little startups that are developing products and showing them how to manufacture them in Australia. Yeah, I'm going to be real busy for a few years now with this USA expansion and a lot of new innovation that we've got coming out. But pretty quickly, I want to shift focus to giving back, because I'm not getting any younger. I want to make sure that I've got time to mentor and pass on what I know, and that magnifies or leverages my influence. It's not just what I've done then, it's what I can inspire other people to do with a bit of luck.
Well, if you'd like to put on some kind of event, our community, I'm sure, would love to hear from you, and it would have a lot to share that's of huge value to people who want to know how it can be viable. Positioning whatever it is that you're making, I'm sure it would resonate with a huge number of people. If you'd like to put on some kind of event, we'd love to partner with you on the effort.
Yeah, it might make sense, Brent, particularly if I do end up with a little book or website or whatever out there, and if I start wanting to collect up followers for that type of manufacturing, will help spread the word.
We're definitely on the same page regarding that things need to be made here, and those skills have to be retained, and we have to inspire people to keep doing that, and to not let just it be a job for someone else in some other part of the world that might not have the greatest standard of living. And it's something that we need to cultivate here. And as I said, that's the end of the conversation now, and I want to thank you warmly for sharing your wisdom with us and for being on AU Manufacturing Conversations. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, many thanks, Brent. It's been a pleasure.